Number 10. 1971 AMC Javelin AMX. New for 71, perennial underdog AMC only made these through 1974, and surprise, surprise, they sold poorly. For 71, the top dog AMX could be had with a 330 horsepower, 401 cubic inch V8, and could do the quarter mile in the mid-14s. Not bad. Mind you, that 330 horsepower rating was a gross horsepower rating, but still, for the time, pretty good. Do these cars look like a third-generation Corvette knockoff? Oh, you betcha. But that was part of the fun. Probably turned as many people off as it appealed to folks. Number 9. 1971 Capri by Mercury. Wait, this isn't a pony car? Well, excuse me, if this isn't a pony car, then what is? In my book, it most certainly is. And I know many of us wish that the Ford Motor Company had made this the 1971 Ford Mustang, if not the 1970 Ford Mustang II. But Henry Ford II and company thought they could do better. Actually, making a version of this car, the 1974 Mustang II, was briefly considered. Can you imagine? Anyway, these cars were actually built by Ford of Europe in Cologne, Germany, and were marketed as Ford Capris over there. For 1971, Ford started selling them in Lincoln Mercury dealerships to give Mercury an economy car to sell, and they sold well despite being expensive and metaphorically shoved to the back of the showroom. Critics loved their handling and braking, although they were a tad pokey with their very small engines. The engines eventually got a bit bigger, but these cars were never hot rods. These got updated for 1975, and they lost a lot of their svelte athletic look in my opinion, but they were still actually better performing cars than most anything made domestically. Let's make that everything made domestically. Mercury sold these captive imports through 1978, replacing them with a Mercury version of the new for 1979 Fox Body Mustang. Number 8. 1983 Ford Mustang GT. Speaking of Fox Bodies, for 83, Ford breathed on their high output 302 they unveiled for 1982, adding a 4-barrel Holley carburetor, a massive and delicious-looking 17-inch air cleaner, revised the exhaust for better breathing, and mid-year introduced a T5 5-speed manual, and the little car that could was good for a sub-7 second 0 to 60 and the quarter mile in 15.2. Sure, it handled like a truck, you sat high in it like you do in a truck, and it rode like a wagon on the Oregon Trail, but if you're of a certain vintage and you love cars, you're a sucker for a 5.0. Even though spitting pinstripes here, the 5.0 is really only a 4.9, but 4.9 wouldn't look nearly as cool on the fenders. Ford's Mercury division sold a version of this car they called the Capri RS. Number 7. 1967 Mercury Cougar. 1967 brought the first update to the game-changing Ford Mustang, and Ford's Mercury division got in on the fun too. Actually, a Mercury version of the Mustang was in the works when the original Mustang was sold, but Ford management kiboshed it since they didn't even know there would be a market for the Mustang. More fun facts? Up until the last minute, the 1964 Ford Mustang was to be known as the Cougar. The Mercury version was codenamed T5, top-of-the-line version was the T7. What was the T5 and T7 was eventually renamed Apollo, but ultimately the in-house name Cougar was agreed upon. What would become the 1967 Cougar used a 3-inch longer wheelbase than the Mustang used, shared not a single body stamping with the Mustang, and it was festooned with the usual luxury musings of the day. A Mustang in a dinner jacket, if you will. Yes, please. Number 6. 1970 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. 1970 brought about the second-generation Chevrolet Camaro that had an all-new body but rode on a somewhat updated chassis the 1967 through 1969 Camaros did. The cars share the same 108-inch long wheelbase. In my opinion, it seemed General Motors rushed the first-generation Camaro to market in 1967 to compete with the Ford Mustang, and its styling always appeared half-baked or incomplete to me. The 1969 version was without question the best of the first 3 years of the Camaro, but the 1970 Camaro, with its Ferrari-inspired styling, pulled all the loose ends together of the first generation to become everything and anything Camaro, which is a made-up word, incidentally, would become over the next 50-plus years. Number 5. 1981 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. I know. Sorry, but I'm a big second-generation Camaro guy, and the last year of these cars, although not what they once were under hood, by the end of their protracted production run, Chevrolet had done a wonderful job updating these cars, especially considering the clodhopper safety bumpers that were mandated starting in 1973. It was all thanks to lots of cladding around the front and backs of these cars that started in 1978. Sure, it may have masked a lot of what wasn't happening under the hood, and these cars certainly aren't for everyone. But again, if you're of a certain vintage, the later second-generation Camaros, that would be the 1978 to 1981s, are about as good looking as pony cars got. Number 4. 1973 Pontiac Trans Am SD 455. In fairness, the drop-off in engine performance was well underway by the time the first energy crisis struck in the fall of 1973. The OPEC embargo just kicked the leg out on a table that was very wobbly to begin with. Through it all, though, there was one screaming chicken that stood out amongst the flock, and that was the 1973 and 1974 Pontiac Trans Am SD 455. SD stood for Super Duty and was a Pontiac acronym dating back to the early 60s, denoting Pontiac's highest performing engines. A lot of people don't think there were any real high-performance cars made after 1970 when compression ratios started dropping, but the 290 net horsepower, net horsepower, 1973 and 1974 Trans Am SD 455 was the one that literally and figuratively flew above all the others. Number 3. 1967 Plymouth Barracuda. Here's a fun fact. Plymouth actually beat the Ford Mustang to market by more than 2 weeks in 1964. Thing is, no one cared, because the first Barracuda was little more than a Plymouth Valiant with a big heavy rear windshield, or windscreen as some people call it. Plymouth even called the 64 and 65 Barracudas Valiant Barracudas. Well, come 1967, the little car that could not got hit with the beauty stick. And wouldn't you know it, Through My Windshield became one of the best-looking cars of the era. Sure, it didn't change much underneath. It was still a Chrysler A-body circa 1960, but in the looks department, the 1967 to 1969 Barracuda had it going on. For those who like to live life on the truly wild side of the street, Chrysler's physically as well as displacement-wise enormous 383 cubic inch V8 was optional on the 67 Barracuda, but you had to live with a car with no power steering. Somewhat surprisingly, these beauty queens sold less well than the 1964 to 1966 models. Well, you know what they say about taste in armpits. Number 2. 1965 Ford Mustang Fastback 2+2. Alright, this may sound sacrilegious, but I'm not the biggest fan of the original Ford Mustang that debuted in April of 1964. I'm not contrarian by nature by any means, but I am honest about what I like and what I don't like. And the original Mustang hardtops? Well, the Fastback 2+2s that debuted in August of 1964 would have changed my opinion about the car that gave the name to the pony car segment. Why Ford sat on these cars until then is a question I'll never get an answer to. In my opinion, these cars are the definitive Mustang. If you need proof, look at all the best-looking Mustang designs over the years. All have multiple strands of design DNA going back to these cars, up to and including the new for 2024 Mustang. Number 1. 1970 Dodge Challenger RT. My late mother, bless her heart, took a very, very young me to see Vanishing Point when it first came out in theaters in 1971. And although there was probably more nudity in the movie than most 5-year-olds should see, excessive use of profanity along with banal dialogue and mindless violence, most of which I don't recall seeing until I saw the film again recently. The best part of the movie, and something I vividly remember, was the car that was central to the movie, and that was a 1970 Dodge Challenger RT. Studio executives decided to use the new for 1970 Dodge Challenger as a favor to the Chrysler Corporation for their loaning their cars to the studio for movie production for $1 a day. So, in essence, Vanishing Point was a 90-minute or so commercial for the new for 1970 Dodge pony car. I found these cars so awesome that I still consider them my favorite ponies of all time. Are these good cars? Oh, no. But they are, in my opinion, the best-looking pony car of all time. When people find out that I'm a car guy, they invariably ask me, "What's your favorite car?" As if I have just one. But I always say, 1970 Dodge Challenger RT in white. But here you go, that's my 10 best pony cars from 1964 through the end of the Malaise Era in 1983. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.